I take genuine interest in many strange topics, but one area I keep coming back to is the metaphysical and the paranormal. Ghosts, divination, crystal healing, UFO sightings, cryptids, anything that sounded too weird to be real, I've probably at least heard of it. I also enjoy watching history documentaries and visiting museums, and my area of interest is in ancient human history and prehistory. Today's case file combines both of these topics. It is an attempted explanation of the origins of humanity and our apparent innate metaphysical abilities. The theory of root races was first published in 1888 by theosophist Helena Blavatsky. She described prehistoric races that inhabited now lost continents and how they gradually evolved into humans. According to the theory, there have been 5 root races to appear on Earth, and 2 more will appear after us, completing a perfect cycle of 7 races. So what are root races exactly? Due to Blavatsky's paradoxical teachings, root races are hard to simply define. The most basic definition of a root race is that it is a group of beings that came from ethereal matter and evolved in succession to form humanity in its current state. These beings began their lives when Earth was a primordial sea, and as the land rose from the waters, they spread out and inhabited the entire planet, taking on progressively corporeal forms. This theory incorporates Buddhist, Greek, Hindu, Jain, and Roman history and mythology to explain the origins of humanity in the lens of esoteric cosmology. The first root race is called the Polarians. They were named so because they lived at the Earth's poles during the Devonian period, before most landmass was habitable. They were made from etheric matter, lacking a solid physical form, and they reproduced by dividing and creating exact copies of themselves, like a cell or amoeba. These beings had no sexual dimorphism and only varied in physical and mental capabilities depending on their accumulated karma from their past life. They had no bones, hair, skin, or bodily organs. Not much is known about the Earth at this time, except that the first land mass to come out of the ocean was Mount Meru. In Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain mythology, this mountain is the center of the physical, metaphysical, and spiritual universes. The second root race is the Hyperboreans. They lived during the Permian era in the supercontinent known as Hyperborea, or Plaksha, which is now the land near the Arctic Circle, though the climate of the area was tropical since the Earth didn't have an axial tilt. These beings were golden yellow and still at least partially ethereal in composition, becoming more opaque and materialized with each generation. Hyperboreans gained the outline of the human form toward the end of their epoch. They also reproduced asexually. The first 2 root races were not conscious and moved about and acted as though they were sleepwalking or in a daze. Instead of having human instinct, they were like children guided by a spiritual instinct. The third root race was known as the Lemurians. They appeared in the Triassic period. According to Theosophy, Lemuria was located in the South Pacific Ocean, and parts of it still exist today as Madagascar, New Guinea, and Australia. Early Lemurians were much like how we describe ghosts, and late in their epoch became very large and tall hermaphroditic cyclops-like beings, coexisting with dinosaurs during the Jurassic period. Their first eyes were organs of both physical and spiritual vision, but soon 2 more physical-only eyes appeared on the Lemurians' heads, and the spiritual eye petrified and is now a vestigial organ known today as the pineal gland. Self-consciousness was awakened within these physical eyes. Lemurians were comprised of 4 subraces, which are akin to what we know today as races or ethnicities. These races are known today as the Khoisans, the Bantu, the Dravidians, and Australo-Melanesians, respectively. The first 3 subraces reproduced by laying eggs, but the 4th reproduced like humans and achieved dimorphism. The continent of Lemuria was destroyed by volcanic eruptions and sank into the ocean. fourth root race is the Atlanteans, written about by Greek scholars, though not esoterically. They inhabited the continent of Atlantis during the late Cretaceous period and were comprised of 7 subraces: the Cro-Magnons, Toltecs, Turanians, Semites, Akkadians, Mongolians, and the Romoahal, which is not a historically verified group. The Atlanteans started out as over 100 feet tall with bronze skin and attained different features and skin colors as they moved from Atlantis to colonize Asia and the Americas. They began to decrease in height, and during their golden age, Atlanteans were around 20 to 30 feet tall. Theosophists claim science is trying to hide evidence of these large humanoids from the general populace. Much is written about the history of the Atlantean civilization in esoteric texts. According to a book called The Solar System, the Golden Age of Atlantis was a period in which Atlantis was ruled by the Toltecs. They were the first to develop warfare, and they had harnessed the power of the energy known as vril to power airships and other vehicles. The civilization experienced a decline when its inhabitants began to practice black magic, which led to them becoming ungrateful and materialistic. War was waged on them by users of white magic. This warfare, along with a series of cataclysmic events, caused the continent to sink in 9564 BC. The fifth and current root race is called the Aryans. They emerged about 100,000 years ago as an offshoot of the Atlantean race before the cataclysms destroyed them and their island. Its subraces include the Hindus, Arabs, Persians, Celts, and Teutons. The sixth subrace, the Australo-American race, is slated to appear in the early 21st century. The Australo-Americans will appear from Western North America and be able to utilize their pituitary glands for channeling psychic abilities and have the additional sense of astral emotion, which will bring a new age of enlightenment and intuition. The sixth root race, tentatively named Homo spiritualis, will appear in the 28th century, eventually living in a new continent which will rise from the Pacific Ocean. Part of California at this time will have been severed from the United States by the San Andreas Fault and moved closer to this new continent. The world will be powered by nuclear reactors, and there will be a single world government under a leader who is the reincarnation of Julius Caesar. Children in this epoch will be born from the mind and not physically. There will be 8 subraces, known as Homo scientella, Homo aurora, Homo ascensus, Homo vocatus, Homo illuminato, Homo creatio, and Homo servitus. The seventh root race is not well documented, presumably because there are tens of thousands of years until its emergence, though it is thought that they will originate on the new continent that emerges during the time of Homo spiritualis, which will be called Pushkara. The end of this epoch will signify a resting period for the human race, though there seems to be no end in sight as it will continue to evolve in cycles. This theory of origin and eventual direction attempts to fill in the gaps of human evolution and consciousness, as well as explain why we have no concrete proof of these societies' existence. For example, Theosophy states that we have no artifacts from the Polarian and Hyperborean races because they were ethereal and left no physical remains, or how the egg-laying of the Lemurians explains why female humans have rudimentary male sex characteristics and vice versa. It also gives assurance that whatever knowledge or enlightenment a person might gain in this cycle of humanity will not be lost and instead donated to a utopian future, quelling the common fear of being lost to time. Personally, I don't think it's possible to ever know the true origin of humanity, nor do I think we will ever truly be able to predict where we are headed as a species and community. Explanations have been put forward, but sometimes there are things we will never know the answer to, and that explanation makes more sense than most.